Story 1. So, this happened about a week ago. I had a meeting at work and was recently promoted. So I decided to wear a collared company shirt I bought a couple of years back with slacks and a nice set of professional shoes. My wife had given me a honey pickup list, so after the meeting, I stopped by America's favorite store, Fall Dart. Now, it was a small list with 3 easily carried items, so I didn't even grab a cart or anything. As I was moving through an aisle to grab the first thing, a sweet little old lady asked for my help reaching something on a top shelf. No problem, she asked nicely, and I'm tall, so I don't actually mind helping. My wife will actually see people having issues and volunteer me from time to time. It's all cool. As I handed it to her, and she smiled, thanking me, I got tapped on the shoulder, one of those bony nun finger types of taps. Hey, come with me. You need to take care of your employee. Now, my mind instantly realized I must look like a manager, and a Karen found me. Still, I'm sorry, ma'am, I don't work here. I don't care if you're corporate or local. Follow me. Forget it, this could be fun. So I followed her, and a couple of aisles away was a lady tasked with doing shopping for those online orders with 4 partially filled totes. I can't find my stuff, and she won't show me where it is. You need to reprimand this employee. The poor employee tried to keep smiling despite looking so tired and fed up with life in general. Ma'am, I'm sure she is just following the directions of her boss, but I don't work here. It does seem that you need some help, though. Do you need my help? As I said that, I pulled down and straightened the chest of my shirt in case of wrinkles and pointed to the slogan under the company crest, helping individuals with disabilities in living independent and fulfilling lives. I really do love helping people and work for a company that works with people with mental and physical disabilities. She glanced down, got a confused look on her face, and looked back up at me, which I had been waiting for. Extending one hand towards her, I said, Ma'am, do you have staff or family here with you? Are you in need of assistance? She got red and started making a squeaky, choking noise. She then started looking really angry but unsure of what to say. She finally clenched her jaw and just stormed off. I turned, showing my shirt to the actual employee, and wished her a good day as she tried not to laugh. Sadly, I didn't see or hear anything else from the lady for the rest of my visit. Story 2. Love this subreddit. The stories are always fun to read, whether it's a crazy Karen freakout or a wholesome encounter. I've only had one post-worthy experience in my many years on Reddit, and finally had another one tonight. As a long-time reader of the sub, I always like to imagine what I would do in an I don't work here situation. My previous encounter post was one thing. I was tired, and it worked very nicely. This one was just as effective and a little bit fun. As the title says, it requires a little acting. This happened about an hour ago. I just gotten off work, stopped at the same store my last encounter happened at, a place that rhymes with small darts. I wear a dress shirt any color is okay to wear. I was wearing white tonight, black pants, a belt, and dress shoes, so nicely dressed, maybe could be mistaken for a manager. I had a cart and had grabbed a few things in the groceries section and was now on the other side of the store looking for a small space heater. I'm near the end of the aisle, facing left, and as I'm looking at all the choices, I hear the click of high heels approaching from the other end of the aisle to my right. As she gets closer, I suddenly hear, Hey you, stop wasting time with whatever you're doing. I need 2 gallons of paint mixed. I've been waiting already. Let's go. All that before I could even acknowledge her presence or turn around. This was my opportunity to try my idea. It requires some acting. So I started by completely ignoring her, as if I didn't even know she was there. I just kept looking at the heaters. After a couple of seconds, I heard what I think was, Are you freaking kidding me? She kinda mumbled it and was wearing a mask, but I'm pretty sure that's what I heard. Then, I heard her approaching and was ready for it. I expected her to grab my arm and spin me around, but she had some manners, it seemed. As she tapped me on the shoulder, I acted like I had just walked through a spider web. I jerked around, flailing my arms, and shouted, Oh my God, you scared the heck out of me. Then, in a slightly lower voice, but still quite louder than a normal speaking voice, I said, Sorry, it wasn't your fault. I lost my hearing in an accident 4 days ago. Doctors can't tell me if it will come back or not. Unfortunately, since it just happened, I don't know sign language yet, And even if we weren't wearing masks, I never learned to read lips. So really, there's no way you can communicate with me right now. If you need help, I would suggest finding an employee. Have a nice night. Then, I just turned back to the heaters and finally chose the one I wanted. I didn't hear another word from her as I walked away. Story 3. I'm not sure why this story just hit me, but I realized it was perfect for this sub. I apologize if the details are vague. This happened to my aunt almost 28 years ago, and not me. This is the grand story of my birth. Backstory. In the spring of 1993, my mother did not plan things well, myself included. When I decided I wanted to be born, she drove herself to the hospital and found they were out of beds in the maternal ward. So she was admitted into a room with a bed as comfortable as a gurney in the emergency room. I bet the room was just as cold. Story. In comes my aunt as practically my mother's midwife. My aunt has a tendency to take charge and wants to help. The nurses had her dress in a cap, mask, gloves, and a disposable hazmat suit. My mother's labor was fast. So fast, I don't think she could get an epidural or much else for pain. The resident doctor there gave the nurses orders to get this, get that, etc. to prepare for delivery. He then started to give my aunt orders, to whom she gave him a look every time he did so. Meanwhile, my mom was starting to push. After about the third time the doctor gave my aunt an order, she got confused and asked him why he was giving her orders with authorization and terminology only nurses had and understood. He explained, also confused why she asked, that it was her job. The nurses nearby stopped having overheard this back and forth, and one intervened. Why wasn't this nurse getting into cabinets and fetching medication? The real nurse told him, "Doctor, that's the aunt." In her defense, she looked the part. The doctor was a little embarrassed and apologetic, but they all had a good laugh. They didn't have any time to think more on it, as I was seconds from being born. At 3:15 a.m., I arrived, and she actually did have to partially catch me because the incompetent doctor thought my mom had more time. My aunt was the first to hold me in the end, and I hope my mom got a much more comfortable bed after the ordeal. Story 4. This story takes place around February 2020. In my country, there were corona guidelines for a week or so, 1.5 meters distance, limited people allowed per store, etc. I 22, female, work in a store with a blue uniform. I was starting to have a headache, so I asked my boss if I could go to the store next door. They sell painkillers and vitamins. They wear red uniforms. After waiting in line, I got lucky and got the last box of Paracetamol. I'm allergic to most other painkillers. The feeling of luck soon vanished when a wild Karen 40-ish female appeared. She took the box out of my hand. I was shocked. "Excuse me," I said. Karen replied, "Just keep restocking. I need more than those." Looking around to see if she was talking to me, I said, "Ma'am, I don't work here. May I have those back, please?" Looking confused and realizing I did not work there, Karen said, "Well, I'm keeping these. Take ibuprofen or something." "Ma'am, I am allergic to the other painkillers. Can I have the paracetamol back, please?" I asked. Karen screamed, "You don't need them anyway. You are young. If I get corona, I can die. I need them more." At this point, my headache was horrible, and I felt sick, so I signaled an employee and explained what happened. The employee took the box of paracetamol, gave them to me, and kicked the lady out of the store for not following the social distance guidelines. Man, never had I encountered a Karen like that. Story 5. The other week, I went to a local store that's like a Walmart, but it's not a franchise. It's just one giant supermarket that's owned locally, and this happened in Canada. I'm a younger guy, and there was a woman with her 3 small kids behind me. This is M. She had Karen hair, but I hadn't really noticed because her mask had a cool moose logo on it. Because it's just natural instinct here, I grabbed the front door handle and held it open for her, a common act of courtesy here. There was an overweight woman in a cowboy hat bigger than Texas, full-on sprinting towards the door from across the parking lot, screaming at me to wait, and I kinda just sat there like, what? She went in, and I just sat there for a second, not understanding what happened. This woman is K for Karen. Anyways, I went ahead and did my shopping, and the woman and her kids came up to me. M started to chat with me. Karen came over to me and said, Hey you work here. Where's the milk? Yeah, seems like a reasonable thing to ask someone. And she seemed snobby, but not anything I caught on to. I just told her where the milk was, and Em and I laughed when Kay left. The employees here wore an apron with their names embroidered on the chest, and I was in full camouflage and muddy boots. Em and I ended up having a really good conversation. Her boyfriend apparently left her and their kids a few years ago, and we just talked for a good 45 minutes while we shopped before Kay came back over. I want to speak to your manager. You have been harassing this girl and her children. I was again dumbfounded, like, what? Good luck finding my manager. He doesn't work here, I told her. I thought she would go full Karen, but she actually stopped for a second and noticed what I was wearing. That's when Em chimed in and said, "Can you leave us alone, please?" And Kay, now defeated, slumped away. I have no clue what this lady thought she was doing or was going to accomplish at all, but I fear for when she becomes a full Karen. Em and I exchanged phone numbers before heading our separate ways and have since been talking about going out. Story 6. I don't know if this was worth it. So, as the post says, a woman tried to get me fired from a restaurant I didn't work at. Here's how the ordeal went down. I worked a few stores down from a sandwich shop that serves homemade soups and artisan sandwiches plus salads. I'll let you guess what this business is. I go to the counter and order my food. I'm handed a number, so I sit back on the condiment table waiting for my order to be called. At this time, I worked at a place of business that required me to wear fairly well-dressed clothing. Slacks, nice shoes, tie, etc. As I'm waiting for my food, a woman comes barreling out from around the corner, gives me a quick little jab to the shoulder, and yells at me. I'm confused, so I turn around to see who exactly is poking me and upset. She begins to holler at me, telling me that there is no tissue paper in the women's restroom and how unacceptable that was, and that the people at this business need to do their jobs better. By the time she is done, I look at her and say, "Okay, so what do you want me to do about it?" I guess this made her more upset, because she began to scream louder, demanding tissue paper. As I previously stated, I was leaning against the condiment counter. I reached over, grabbed a handful of napkins, and handed them to her. I actively knew I was going to make her more upset, but at this point in time, I was tired of her nonsense. She turned around and ran to the front counter where food was being ordered, passing a pretty large line, and demanded to speak to a manager. The manager came over, and she continued to berate him, explaining that his employees were incompetent and insincere. He asked her who it was, and she proudly turned around, grabbed me by my shoulder, and pulled me to the counter. At this time, I'm really upset. I'm tired of being manhandled by an old woman, so I yanked my arm away and told her not to touch me again. Mind you, through this horrible ordeal, I tried to explain that I didn't work there, but was never given the opportunity to. I also worked down in the same shopping center and ate at this restaurant relatively often, so the manager knew me. He saw the smirk on my face when she pointed me out and gave me a smirk back. Rolling his eyes, he looked back at the customer and said, "Well, ma'am, that gentleman doesn't work here, so he's not my employee." She replied, "He has to. He's wearing your colors," and he gave me napkins in place of toilet paper. The manager lost it. He couldn't help but just laugh hysterically. The buzzer they hand out for the food had told me my meal was ready to be picked up quite some time ago, but I wanted to see how things played out. She became irate. I finally chimed in and loudly said, "Enough, you old bat. I didn't give you the napkins to wipe yourself. I gave them to you to shove them in your mouth." I feel like this next sentence would qualify me to be put in the subreddit. That really happened, but it did, and alas, it got the reaction I wanted. The entire restaurant at this point in time had heard everything and watched everything unfold. And when I said that, they broke down with laughter to the point that the woman turned as red as the tomatoes they sliced on the sandwich. Story 7. Today, I was in Home Depot buying more plants for my insane plant collection. I'm holding 2 in a pot, crouched down, raking the label on a plant to see its country of origin. Azaleas. I keep looking at my plant. Azaleas. I keep looking, then a shadow blocks my light. I look up, and there's a middle-aged white dude looking down at me. Azaleas, he says again. After my last post on here about this rude nonsense way customers have of asking for something, I thought about how I would handle this if it ever happened again. Are you trying to ask me a question? I reply. Yes, I asked you where the azaleas are. I don't think you understand how questions work. Just saying a word at someone is not a question. It's rude and demeaning, and I don't work here, you jerk. He actually apologized. Then I walked away. It felt freaking amazing. Story 8. Okay, first time poster on mobile, English not my first language. If you decide to roast me, please use spices. Cinnamon, allspice, ginger, whatever you like. I mentioned part of this story in a comment, and people asked for the full story, so here it is. A little background. Since I became an adult and stopped working retail, I get an I don't work here experience almost every month. My wife says it's something on my face. This is the first time one of my kids was present. Also, for the place this happened. In my country, we have small shops that sell fresh products, mainly vegetables. On to the story. This happened in August. We live in a coastal city, walking distance from the beach. We both had 2 weeks off from work and spent every day at the beach with the kids. We usually go early in the morning and stay until noon, and then maybe go back in the evening. That day, my wife had left early with our oldest to prepare lunch, and I stayed behind with our 4-year-old daughter. As we were preparing to leave, my wife called to tell me to pick some fresh vegetables we had run out of. The grocery store was on our way home, so it was okay. So, we stopped at the store. I exchanged pleasantries with the owner, an old classmate of mine, and stayed outside looking for what we needed while my daughter entered the store to talk with the owner's son, same age, same preschool. The owner had 2 customers inside the store. Next to me was a lovely old lady who asked if I could help put some of her groceries in her cart, especially 2 5 kg bags of potatoes. I saw no reason not to, so I put them in the cart. She thanked me. Half in my language and half in Russian. I replied in kind. I understand some of the language because some relatives of my grandma were from there, and I picked up some of the language when I was growing up. She smiled, waved goodbye, and I returned to my browsing. And then Karen emerged. I want 3 kg of onions, 4 kg of potatoes, and 3 kg of tomatoes, and be fast about it. I'm in a hurry. I turned around to see a middle-aged woman in a sundress, sunglasses, big hat, stereotypical Karen haircut, with her arms crossed in front of her and tapping her foot. Because the store is self-service and I'm wearing swim trunks, an old shirt, flip-flops, my beach towel draped on my shoulder, and carrying a ridiculously huge beach bag, I gave her no mind and returned to my shopping. Big mistake. Karen decided to break social distancing and grab me by the shoulder. I gave you an order, boy. I'm 40 years old, by the way. Now do it, or I'll get you fired. I don't work here, I replied and took a step backward. Don't give me that nonsense. I saw you helping that other woman. She kindly asked for my help to move the bags. I still don't work here. So you only help your compatriots, you little jerk? What a disgrace. And she went on a very racist rant, cursing every other word. At some point, we had gathered spectators. The owner had come out, along with the kids, and my daughter decided to come to my rescue. My daughter doesn't like people fighting and finds creative ways to break them. Why are you screaming at my father? He already told you he doesn't work here. My daughter chipped in when Karen stopped for breath. Because he doesn't know his place. Now go away, Karen replied and started to continue her rant. The owner was about to step in when my daughter turned around, dropped her bikini bottom, and blew a raspberry. Karen was momentarily stunned. That's rude, she managed to say. Well, I'm 4. What's your excuse? My daughter replied, fixing her bottoms. At that point, everybody, except Karen, started laughing. Karen was doing her best imitation of a fish, her mouth opening and closing with no sound coming out. At that point, the owner stepped in and told her to leave and that her business was not welcome there. The rest of us had a good laugh, picked our groceries, and went home. For the rest of our vacation, my daughter would accompany me to the store, and she was always scanning the customers with a hand clasped on the side of her bikini bottoms.